What would you do if a stranger stood at your gate, called 911, and told the cops you were the intruder on your own land? Would you laugh, fight back, or stand still as the gears of power turned against you? That's what I asked myself that morning when Karen showed up, phone in hand, barking at the police dispatcher like she was ordering from a fast food drive-thru. The words she spat into the receiver still echo in my skull. Yes, officer. There's a man refusing to leave a property my son is entitled to. He's a squatter. We're with the HOA. She didn't even whisper. I was standing behind my screen door, arms folded across my chest. My German Shepherd Duke pacing beside me, low growl vibrating like a motor under his breath. She was maybe 30 feet away, at the edge of my gravel drive, but her voice carried with the arrogance of someone who believed she could summon authority with nothing but volume and entitlement. And perhaps she could. Karen was dressed like a woman who thought the whole county belonged to her, a crisp linen blouse, oversized sunglasses, a laminated HOA badge flapping in the desert wind. Her eyes pierced through the screen mesh and locked on mine like a sniper lining up a shot. "He won't leave," she said again, louder this time, as if repeating the lie made it more true. "My son is developing this land. He has plans. This man is causing distress to our community." My hands curled into fists. My mouth stayed shut. I wasn't about to feed the fire. Not yet. What Karen didn't know, what she never even bothered to consider, was that this land had been mine for 15 years, left to me by my uncle who taught me to raise cattle, fix fences, and respect silence more than noise. My uncle had signed the papers in 1970, long before the HOA ever existed. He'd opted out, legally and permanently. But Karen didn't see facts. She saw opportunities. And when people like her see land, they don't see heritage or hard work. They see leverage. Her son, Chad, a man-child of 28 who couldn't mow a lawn without instructions, was standing behind her, arms crossed like a mall cop, nodding along with every lie his mother told. He didn't speak, not yet, but his eyes held the same smug glint of someone who believed life owed him something just for showing up. That morning, the sun was barely over the ridge. The dew hadn't even burned off the porch steps. And already I could feel the weight of something shifting. Not just a bad neighbor, not just a nuisance. This was the start of something deeper. A power play, a land grab with legal teeth. And the worst part? She wasn't bluffing. I thought she was. At first, I thought maybe she'd yell, send a letter, and eventually wear herself out. But the moment she said the word squatter, she crossed a line. Not just moral, legal. That was the hook. That word, spoken so confidently into a police line, triggered a process she didn't even understand. Because by calling me a squatter on my own land, she invited an investigation, a challenge, a chain reaction. She'd opened the gate to something that even the HOA couldn't close. Within 20 minutes, the sirens arrived. One cruiser, then another, lights flashing against the pale stucco of my house. Duke barked once, low and sharp. I stayed calm, didn't flinch, just waited. The officers stepped out slowly. Hands on hips, Karen smiled like she just won a prize. Chad stood taller. The taller officer approached. "Are you Mr. Walker?" "Yes, sir." My voice was steady, my boots rooted firm into the wooden porch. "We received a call about a property dispute." He said, "The woman over there claims this land was promised to her family through an HOA transfer." I felt my blood freeze. HOA transfer. That wasn't just a lie, it was fiction. "Sir," I said calmly, "I have the title deed. I've got every document proving this land is mine. Has been since before the HOA was even formed." He nodded. "Professional. Would you be willing to show us those documents?" "Absolutely," I replied. Turning toward the screen door, I could feel Karen's stare burning a hole in my back as I stepped inside. I came back with a folder thick enough to choke a printer. Tax records, title deed, the opt-out exemption letter from my uncle, signed and notarized. Surveyor maps. I handed it over. The officer flipped through it slowly, nodding. Karen's voice shot through the air again. Don't let him fool you. My son is a veteran. He deserves that land. Another lie. Chad had never served a day in his life. The officer's jaw twitched. Then something snapped. Karen marched up the driveway, got in the officer's face, and shoved his shoulder. You need to remove him, she shouted. He's not part of this community. My son has development plans. We need him gone. The officer raised a hand. Ma'am, step back and don't touch me again. But Karen wasn't done. She screamed something that chilled me deeper than the early morning air. Then I'll file an emergency injunction with the HOA and make sure you're evicted by Friday evicted. From my own land. That was when Duke let out a growl that even I hadn't heard before. Deep, warning, ancient. I put a hand on his collar, held him back. I took a step forward, ready to respond. When Chad Sweet, silent Chad, ran past his mother and swung a punch, a wild, clumsy swing aimed at the officer. He missed. Barely. His fist caught the officer's radio instead, knocking it to the gravel with a clatter. The response was instant. The officer twisted his arm behind his back and slammed him face down onto the hood of the cruiser. Cuffs clicked like thunder. Hands where I can see them, the second officer barked. Stepping between me and Karen, Karen screamed, "Don't touch my son." He was only trying to make a point, ma'am. Back up now or you'll be joining him, the officer said. His voice was steady, but lethal. I stood there, frozen, heart racing. Duke's growl never stopped. Chad, now red-faced and stunned, groaned. He stole our land. We're just taking back what's ours. The officer didn't respond, just hauled him to the back seat of the cruiser. Karen ran after him, banging on the window. Chatty baby, don't say a word, mommy's going to fix this. But there was no fixing what had just happened. The moment Karen placed that 911 call, she didn't just report a neighbor. She pulled the trigger on a war of documentation, intention, manipulation, a war fought not just with fists or fences, but with bylaws, petitions, and courtroom whispers. And the thing that still haunts me is how confidently she walked into it, assuming she'd win, assuming her HOA badge held more weight than the law. That day ended with Chad in handcuffs and a deputy's warning. But I knew it was just the beginning, because people like Karen don't lose quietly. They escalate, they call in favors, they twist narratives. They weaponize rules that were supposed to protect people and use them to crush them instead. That's the curse of HOAs when power lands in the wrong hands. And that was the day I learned something important. You don't have to start a war to end up in one. Sometimes, all it takes is standing your ground while someone else decides you don't belong. Tell me, where would you draw the line? They say silence is golden. But in Oak Ridge Hills, silence is where threats hide. The morning after Chad was hauled off in handcuffs, I found a letter shoved under by my front gate. It wasn't from the sheriff or a lawyer. It was from the HOA. No envelope, no stamp, just a single-page notice printed in all caps, like someone was screaming through paper. Notice of inquiry due to recent community concerns. The Homeowners Association will be reviewing the legal boundaries and land use compliance of the property at 412 Ranch Hill Lane. I read it twice. Then again, my property, my name, legal boundaries, land use compliance. The kicker was the final line: failure to cooperate may result in fines, legal notices, or emergency intervention. Emergency intervention. That's when I knew Karen wasn't backing down. She'd failed to intimidate me with threats and fake claims. So now she was dragging the entire HOA into her crusade, not just through whispers or passive-aggressive letters, but through paperwork with teeth. I drove straight to the county land office that same afternoon. The woman at the front desk knew me. Her name was Lorraine, late 60s. Cat glasses, the type who didn't miss a detail. I handed her the letter and raised an eyebrow. "This smell like HOA overreach to you?" She read it, snorted, and waved me back to the counter. "Let me pull your file." 5 minutes later, she returned with a thick manila folder. She tapped it. "You're clean. Mr. Walker, grandfathered out. Opt-out form from '79. Notarized and scanned, HOA has no jurisdiction past that creek by Miller's Fence. This, she said, holding up the HOA letter like it was a used napkin, is pure harassment. I asked for certified copies of everything. She made me 3 sets. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing for war. I drove home with a file box on the passenger seat and a pit in my stomach. Because legal truth doesn't always win. Noise does. Confusion. Perception. Karen knew how to weaponize perception. And the very next day, she proved it. At exactly 6:47 a.m., a 20-foot rental truck pulled up outside my gate, not blocking the road, not delivering anything, just idling there like a threat. Karen stood beside it in a pink tracksuit and a sun visor, waving a folder over her head like she was auctioning my house. "You have until Sunday to vacate," she shouted, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "My son is moving in. We've spoken to the board." I walked out to the porch, slow and steady, didn't yell, didn't curse, just stared. "You brought a moving truck to my ranch?" I asked. She smirked. "Enjoy your last 2 nights. Squatter." I didn't answer her. I looked straight at the security camera mounted on the corner of the porch and gave it a wave. Because unlike her, I had evidence, and evidence doesn't blink. That night, I barely slept. Duke stayed by the door. Alert. I could feel something coming, like the pressure in the air before a lightning strike. Sure enough, at 2:13 a.m., the alarms tripped. Floodlights lit up the front yard like a football field. On the security feed, I saw a figure crawling low near the barn, holding something long and metallic, a pipe wrench. He wasn't walking, he was slithering. Like some cheap war movie extra, I zoomed in Chad, same sneakers, same limp on his left leg. He was digging beside the barn's foundation, aiming for the irrigation line, maybe to sabotage it, maybe worse. I didn't wait. I hit the panic button wired straight to the sheriff's department. Within minutes, squad cars tore up my driveway. Chad tried to bolt, but tripped face first into a trough. They hauled him out, soaked. Sputtering something about checking the plumbing, Karen came flying out of her house in her robe, screaming nonsense about urgent repairs and volunteer work. The officers weren't buying it. This time, they didn't leave with a warning. They took Chad in for questioning, and I filed an official complaint. 2 days later, the retaliation started. Someone slashed my irrigation line clean through. Then my vegetable garden was torn up by tire tracks. One of my cows wandered off through an open gate. Not stolen, just released. A message. That same wag. Karen posted an announcement on the HOA app calling for emergency community action to reclaim land from a dangerous squatter. She even proposed a vote to forcibly annex my ranch into the HOA's domain, attaching a photo of Chad in a suit like he was some startup CEO. It was insanity, but it worked. Some neighbors actually bought him. Not many, but enough to make me feel the ground shifting under my boots. I called the sheriff again, showed him the footage. He was sympathetic but honest unless they caught someone red-handed. There wasn't much they could do. "They're trying to get your land rezoned," he said quietly. "If they succeed, this might go above our pay grade." That's when I called Melanie, old friend, now a local reporter with a camera crew and a nose for HOA drama. She came out that weekend, filmed the barn, the broken pipes, the footage of Chad crawling like a saboteur. She even got a shot of the fake HOA badge Karen had dropped on my porch one night. We aired the story under the headline "Ranch Under Siege," local viral. But the real explosion came a week later, when a national HOA watchdog group picked up the clip. Overnight, I had thousands of messages, support, offers to help, even legal contacts. One stood out: Linda, a retired federal real estate lawyer now working pro bono on property rights cases. She called me, calm and focused. "I've seen this before." She said, "It's textbook. They build a paper trail, muddy the waters, and apply for condemnation. But we can stop it if you act fast." She started immediately, filed formal complaints, drafted letters, contacted the county, and just when I thought things were turning, I came home to find a pile of dead chickens in my yard. No, just 27 rotting corpses under the desert sun. I called the sheriff again. This time, they brought gloves, bags, and a warrant. They searched Chad's garage, found blood-stained gloves and security footage from a neighbor's doorbell. Cam Chad, loading something into the back of a pickup at 3 a.m. It was enough to keep him under house arrest. But Karen escalated. I returned from town one afternoon to find my front door hanging open. Duke gone, kitchen trashed. And the words "get out" carved deep into my dining table. I froze, not from fear, from fury. I searched the ranch like a madman. Every pasture, every coop, the pond, the fields. I finally found Duke tied up in the tool shed with garden twine, shaking, terrified but alive. I knelt, freed him, whispered, "Good boy." Then I called the sheriff. Again, they documented everything: photos, prints, footage. This isn't civil anymore. One deputy said, "This is criminal." But Karen still walked around like a queen, hosting brunches, posing with HOA board members. It was psychological warfare smiles in public, knives in the dark. Then the zoning notice arrived. Cold, clinical, notice of intent to condemn property, pending HOA acquisition request. I stared at it for a long time, hands trembling. They were trying to take the land, not with force, but with paperwork. They'd filed for a review. If approved, the county could force me to sell at a price they set. I called Linda. "This is it." I said, "They're going for the kill." She responded calmly. "Then we go on offense. Gather statements, collect signatures, go public again." I agreed. That night, I opened a folder on my computer, titled it HOA Karen Files. I uploaded every document, every video, every false letter, every anonymous statement from neighbors too scared to speak before. I shared the link with a few trusted folks. Within 48 hours, it had over 3,000 views. And just when the tide seemed ready to turn, someone set fire to a pile of hay in my barn. The only reason the whole structure didn't go up was because of the sprinkler system I'd installed last month. It kicked in just in time. Still, damage was real. Blackened beams, melted plastic. The scent of smoke soaked into the walls. The firefighters said I was lucky. The security footage showed a hooded figure with a gas can. It was blurry, but the sneakers. The limp Chad, again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch, shotgun across my lap, Duke at my feet, because this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about ownership, not just of property, but of dignity. And if Karen wanted a war, she was finally going to get one. Tell me, how far would you go to protect the place you call home? They say a man's breaking point doesn't come with fireworks or thunderclaps. It comes quietly, like a splinter you don't notice until it festers. For me, that splinter came on a Sunday morning, just as the sun was bleeding across the top of the barn and the air still held the chill of midnight's breath. I found a sign hammered into the dirt right at the edge of my driveway, a wooden plank, freshly painted, nailed into the earth like a declaration of war. It read, "Future site of Chad's organic eco-community, coming soon." There was a smiling photo of Chad glued to the corner of the board, photoshopped to perfection. A button suit over a white backdrop, like he was running for office or founding a tech startup. I didn't scream. I didn't rip it out. I stood there for a minute and let it wash over me. The arrogance, the fantasy, the entitlement. Then I grabbed a crowbar from the shed and pried that bastard out of my soil. Wood splintering like bones, I dragged it to the burn pile and torched it. And still, I knew that wasn't the end. I was starting to understand something deeply unsettling. This wasn't just Karen and Chad trying to take what wasn't theirs. This was a war of identity, a battle for narrative, in their eyes. I wasn't a man protecting family land. I was the final obstacle in their curated vision of progress. 3 days later, I received a new envelope, not mailed, not hand-delivered, but slid into my mailbox like a thief's calling card. The county development office had sent it. Inside was a formal notification review, pending for eminent domain, subject to HOA jurisdiction appeal. My throat went dry. That phrase, eminent domain, tastes like rust when spoken. It means your land can be taken, legally, if the government decides it serves the greater good. And Karen, somehow, had spun her narrative into a civic argument: affordable housing, sustainable eco-village, community benefit. Those weren't just buzzwords, they were weapons now. I drove straight to the zoning office. Legal file in hand, the receptionist smiled like she'd been coached to. The zoning officer is in a meeting. I asked with who, members of the Oak Ridge Hills HOA. She answered. I nearly laughed. Of course she was. I left my documents and demanded a return call. That night, I sat down with Melanie again. I told her everything: the new petition, the eminent domain filing, the sign, the fire. She didn't hesitate. We need to do a follow-up. This time, with teeth. We filmed the next morning. She brought a drone and a second cameraman. We did a walkthrough of the ranch, highlighting the damaged barn beams, the irrigation line sabotage, the video footage of Chad's nighttime activities. We even showed the chicken carcasses blurred, but real. Then we cut to the HOA clubhouse, where Karen had been photographed smiling beneath a banner that read Oak Ridge Forward, a new vision for Ranch Hill Lane. Melanie stood in front of it, looking straight into the lens. How far can one HOA go before it becomes something else entirely? The story aired within 48 hours. This time, it didn't just go local, it exploded. HOA watchdogs, property rights forums, national landowner alliances picked it up. Hashtags began trending. Justice for Duke. Hands off the ranch. #HOA invasion. My inbox filled up again, but among the noise was one voice that cut through: Linda. She sent a file titled Strategic Legal Countermeasures. It was a full battle plan, injunctions, temporary restraining orders, community action affidavits. I didn't just have hope now, I had a weaponized legal ally. But then, like clockwork, Karen struck again. This time, not with sabotage, but with optics. She scheduled a community emergency meeting at the clubhouse and filled it with banners, cookies, and an open forum on neighborhood squatting and noncompliance. She even live-streamed it. I watched from home. Heart pounding, she stood at the podium, wrapped in a cardigan that screamed innocence, and spoke like a woman betrayed. My son has decided to step up and run for HOA president. If elected, we will formally annex the disputed property and begin development immediately. A smattering of applause followed, some gasps, but mostly silence. And then she dropped the hammer. We already have a bulldozer lined up. We're starting with a model home on the squatter's lot. The future begins next month. I shut the laptop. The next morning, there it was, a full-size, yellow bulldozer parked right outside my gate. No workers, just the machine. A sticky note taped to the seat: coming soon, the new Chad estate. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't email the HOA. I drove straight to the clubhouse during one of their weekly meetings. Place was full. Karen was there, seated like royalty at the head of the table, her son beside her, scribbling notes like a campaign strategist. I walked in and didn't say a word, just stood. The room went quiet. One of the board members, Denise, the one with kind eyes, spoke. He has the right to speak. 5 minutes. Karen rolled her eyes. Why should we let a trespasser speak? But I didn't wait for permission. I walked to the front and laid down a folder thick with statements. Neighbors harassed, boundaries ignored, animals threatened, photos, video clips, police reports. Then I spoke. This land has been in my family since 1979. You know that. But this isn't about zoning. It's about power, about rewriting reality through intimidation, manipulation, and fake paperwork. You may not like me, but I don't lie. I don't threaten. I don't hide behind badges I printed at Staples. The silence was deafening. Then George, a quiet man who lived 2 blocks down, stood. Karen fined me $500 for flowers. I'm not even in the HOA. Another woman stood. She tried to tow my car for blocking a sidewalk that doesn't exist. One by one, voices rose. Karen stood to respond, but people started walking out. The next day, Linda filed a formal motion with the county. We demanded an immediate halt on the annexation vote and requested an independent audit of the HOA's recent actions. But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, a U-Haul truck barreled through my front gate, splintering the wood like matchsticks. Chad leapt from the passenger seat with a sledgehammer in hand, screaming like he'd snapped completely. He ran straight for the barn, yelling something about reclaiming what's ours. I didn't move. I simply walked back inside and hit the panic button. Not to the sheriff this time, to the state troopers in the fire department. Sirens screamed down Ranch Hill Lane within minutes. The news crew showed up too. Apparently, someone on the HOA livestream had tipped them off. The moment was cinematic. Troopers surrounded the scene, guns holstered but ready. Chad was tackled mid-swing, the sledgehammer clattering to the dirt. Karen tried to run. She didn't get far. They detained her on site. Not arrested yet, but removed for questioning. The footage aired that night. It showed the truck, the broken gate, Chad's wild swing, Karen's meltdown. The headline read, HOA president's son arrested in violent land dispute. Overnight, the county suspended all HOA-related zoning petitions. A judge granted me a 500-foot protective order. Chad faced felony charges. Karen was banned from holding office within the HOA. And just like that, the empire she built on entitlement collapsed. But even then, I didn't celebrate. I rebuilt the gate, strengthened the barn doors, and mounted a plaque over the fireplace inside that read, "This land was bought with sweat, not signatures. Tell me when the law bends for power. Who bends it back?" I thought the U-Haul incident would be the end of it. When troopers hauled Chad away, sledgehammer still clutched in trembling hands, and Karen stood screaming beneath the flashing lights. I believed foolishly that the worst had passed. I even allowed myself a quiet morning 2 days later, sitting on the porch with Duke resting at my feet and coffee steaming between my palms. But peace in Oak Ridge Hills was just a mask, thin, fragile, and quick to crack. Because on the third morning after the showdown, a new envelope arrived, certified, official seal from the county development office. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the porch railing as the wind flicked its corners and the heat crept in. Part of me already knew what it said. When I finally slid it open, the letter inside was short, sharp, and surgical in tone. Notice of intent to condemn property. Condemnation proposal. Entering phase 2 of review. Subject to HOA jurisdiction petition. That was the phrase that lodged like gravel in my throat. Phase 2. They were moving forward. Despite the protective order, despite the videos, despite the headlines and the fire and the trespassing and the sabotage, they were still trying to seize my land through legal channels. Because Karen's damage hadn't been limited to brute force or neighborhood manipulation. Somewhere, in some committee, she had laid enough paperwork, fake plans, community vision statements, environmental impact proposals, and zoning whispers to create a smoke trail the county was following blindly. I called Linda immediately. Her voice was calm but clipped. "This is the long game I warned you about. She may be discredited in your neighborhood, but she had allies in places that don't watch local news. Bureaucrats don't care about emotions. They care about procedure. They're following the breadcrumbs she left." I asked what we could do. She gave me a list. File for an injunction to halt phase 2. Rally non-HOA residents to sign a formal protest petition. Contact media again. Escalate beyond local channels. Start a campaign, not just to stop Karen, but to make Oak Ridge Hills a case study in HOA overreach. That afternoon, I started gathering names. People like George and Lisa signed without hesitation, but others hesitated. Fear still hung heavy in the neighborhood, like a scent no one could scrub off. Some people had quietly benefited from Karen's tenure. Others feared reprisal from what remained of the board. And then there were those who didn't want to be involved, who whispered good luck and shut their doors before I could say another word. But I didn't stop. I went house to house, respectful, honest, armed with a clipboard and printouts. Within a week, I had 27 verified signatures from households not under HOA control, all objecting to the annexation and the rezoning attempt. Then came the curveball. A neighbor named Mike, Someone I'd barely spoken to beyond a wave across the pasture line knocked on my door, hat in hand, eyes cast low. "Look," he said. "I probably should have come sooner." I nodded once, motioned to him to speak. "Karen tried to bribe me 2 weeks ago, offered to cover my HOA dues for a year if I signed a statement saying you'd threatened Chad with a firearm. I didn't speak, just let the rage sit in my gut like hot stone. I refused." He continued, "But she kept asking around. I think she found someone who said yes." That night, I logged into the county court system and searched my case file. There it was. A false affidavit submitted by a man named Brent T. Colburn claimed he saw me brandish a shotgun at a community meeting. I'd never even met the man. He didn't live on my road. I sent the file to Linda. Her response was swift. "Fabricated affidavit. We'll challenge it. But in the meantime, they'll use it to cloud your intent. We need to keep you spotless. No angry confrontations. No media slip-ups. Stay legal. Stay visible. We'll tear it down one lie at a time." But lies had their own momentum. 3 days later, the sheriff's office showed up at dawn, sirens silent, but presence loud. 2 cruisers, 1 unmarked vehicle. I stepped out, calm, barefoot, shirt half buttoned. "Mr. Walker," one deputy said formally, "you're not under arrest. But we're here to serve an emergency cease and desist regarding unauthorized construction activity on your land." I blinked. "What construction?" He sighed. "The HOA submitted photos and statements claiming you're trenching without a permit, new development, violation of land use while zoning is under review." I let out a hollow laugh. I was fixing my irrigation ditch, same one that's been there since before half these homes were built. He didn't argue, just handed me the paperwork. Across the top in bold temporary land freeze, effective immediately, I signed in nothing, just accepted the copy, nodded once, and walked back inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. Duke lay beside the bed, head on my ankle, breathing heavy but steady. At 2:11, my phone buzzed. A text from Melanie. "Check the HOA live stream." Now, I did. And what I saw made me grip the phone so tight the plastic creaked. Karen was back, not in person but on camera. Standing at the podium in the HOA clubhouse, hair pulled tight, eyes shining with something between madness and victory. "I'm proud to announce," she said, "that we've initiated final review for annexation. Our proposal includes not just 412 Ranch Hill Lane, but all adjacent parcels not currently under HOA management. This is for safety, for community growth, and to ensure a unified future." Behind her, a banner read, "Vote yes, unite Ranch Hill." My land wasn't just a target anymore. It was ground zero. She was expanding the battlefield. The next morning, Linda filed another motion, this time requesting an emergency court hearing to halt the land freeze and force a formal investigation into the HOA's annexation attempt. But the county moved slow, and Karen moved fast. 2 nights later, someone broke into my barn again. Not to burn it. This time, they scrawled a message across the side in red spray paint. "Squatter, go home." I painted over it myself. Didn't call the sheriff. I was done giving her attention, but that didn't mean I wasn't preparing. I doubled the security cameras, hired a local fencing crew to reinforce the gate, put up signs every 20 feet. Private property, not under HOA, but nothing could prepare me for what happened next. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the hills and the shadows grew long across the gravel path, I saw a car pull up near the road. A woman stepped out, late 50s, nervous eyes, holding something. It was Denise, the board member who once brought me pie. She approached the gate, careful, cautious. "I just want you to know," she said quietly, "not all of us are with her. She bullied her way onto the board. She's running this whole show with fear and fantasy. We're calling a vote to remove her next week." I didn't say much, just nodded and thanked her. But inside, a fire had started, because for the first time in weeks, I saw the beginning of something rare in HOA politics consequence. Karen had gone too far. The press, the police, the petitions, even her own allies were beginning to crack. But a woman like that doesn't back down. She doubles down, and sure enough, 3 days later, another envelope arrived. This time, hand-delivered and stamped with Karen's private notary seal, inside a formal settlement offer, a six-figure check, a gag clause, a quiet exit. She was trying to buy me out after all the sabotage, all the lies, all the attempts to bury me in red tape. I lit the check on fire in the kitchen sink and filmed the flames dancing off the edges. I posted the video online with one caption, "Not for sale." It went viral overnight. Tell me what's the price of home, if not the fight to keep it. The final chapter didn't begin with a bang. It began with a whisper, a rumor trickling through the neighborhood like oil on water. The morning after I burned Karen's settlement offer and watched the ash drift into my sink, a neighbor named Travis stopped me at the mailbox, his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette he wasn't supposed to be smoking. "They're saying the board is flipped," he said. "Karen's days are numbered." I didn't say a word. I didn't trust words anymore. I needed actions, proof. But later that afternoon, I received a call from Denise. She didn't mince words. "We held the vote. She's out." My hand tightened around the phone. "Unanimous, all but one," she said. "Some coward abstained, but it's done. She's been stripped of all HOA power." I exhaled, long and slow. But the breath didn't bring relief. I knew Karen. She wouldn't go quietly. And I was right. The next morning, I found flyers stapled to telephone poles at the edge of Ranch Hill Lane. Dozens of them, copies scattered like dead leaves. Each had my face in grainy black and white with bold letters, "Dangerous squatter, will not leave." Beneath it, aggressive, "Records people, owns attack dog, HOA currently pursuing eviction strategy." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just desperation, it was escalation. Karen had been dethroned. And now she was unbound, no longer pretending to be an HOA queen, just a woman on a personal crusade. I spent half the day ripping those flyers down, while Duke sniffed the air like he sensed something foul. But the damage was done. A few local blogs picked up the story. A new wave of threats appeared in my inbox. "Get out while you can. Your kind doesn't belong here. We'll finish what Chad started." I forwarded everything to Linda. She responded with a single line, "We go nuclear." The motion she filed that week wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a declaration. We demanded a full-scale investigation into the HOA's activities over the past 12 months, their annexation attempts, fraudulent affidavits, harassment campaigns, and unlawful property intimidation. We attached every piece of evidence we had, including testimony from neighbors, drone footage, and internal emails obtained through whistleblowers. But Karen wasn't done playing her hand. That Friday, a black SUV with tinted windows idled outside my gate for over an hour. No plates. Just sat there like a threat. The next day, a drone buzzed over my barn, dipping low, almost taunting. I shot it down. Legally, it was trespassing, but part of me enjoyed watching it crash into the dry grass and spark. Duke barked like it was a victory. Then came the fire inspection. 2 men in county uniforms showed up, claiming to be responding to an anonymous tip about improper fuel storage. They had no warrant but waved clipboards like they were badges. I refused them entry, politely, firmly. They left after 15 tense minutes, muttering something about unsafe conditions. I called Linda immediately. She suspected Karen had filed the tip under a pseudonym. We prepared a counter-complaint. That night, Melanie reached out again. She wanted to run a final segment, a full expose tying everything together: the harassment, the politics, the legal warfare. "I want to call it The Ranch That Wouldn't Fall," she said. I agreed. We filmed over 2 days. Every inch of the property, every scar and scorch mark. She even interviewed Duke well, filmed him, lying proudly on the porch. The piece aired Sunday night. By Monday morning, my email was flooded. Support, donations, stories from across the country, people who'd fought similar battles, people who'd lost, people who wanted me to win for all of them. Then came the letter that stopped me cold. A second notice from the county zoning board. Not a threat, not a freeze, a resolution. Upon further investigation and public response, the County of Maricopa has decided to terminate the HOA's condemnation petition. Property at 412 Ranch Hill Lane is confirmed as privately owned, with full exemption from any and all HOA jurisdiction. No further review will be undertaken. I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. I framed it the next day and hung it above the fireplace in the barn, the same one Chad tried to destroy with a sledgehammer. But it didn't end there. Because Karen wasn't finished. Not really. Her last act wasn't a letter or a lawsuit. It was personal. 1 month later, as the dust began to settle and spring crept over the hills, she showed up again, not at my gate, at a town hall meeting downtown. During the open floor, she stood and announced a new petition this time, not to take my land, but to reform community policy standards across unincorporated zones. I sat in the back row, hidden under a cap. I watched her voice tremble with the strain of having lost everything and refusing to admit it. She still used the word squatter, still said public nuisance, but the room didn't clap. No one nodded. It was as if her spell had broken and people were seeing the real Karen for the first time, desperate, deluded, irrelevant. I never spoke to her again, not directly, but I saw her once more. From a distance, she was loading boxes into a sedan, no U-Haul, no banners, no audience. Just a woman who had built a kingdom of fiction and watched it burn to ash. Chad, I heard, took a plea deal, avoided jail but got slapped with fines, probation, and mandatory therapy. The HOA board restructured completely. Denise was elected president. First act, a public apology. Second, establishing a rule no further attempts to annex non-HOA land, ever. As for me, I stayed. I rebuilt the gate again, this time with steel-reinforced hinges and motion sensors. The barn was restored to its former glory, stronger, cleaner, quieter. The land was mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit. Melanie's segment eventually made its way to national news. I got called a folk hero once. Someone made a meme. Duke says not today. Karen, it made me laugh. I printed it and taped it above Duke's food bowl. But the best moment came one late afternoon. Just as the sky turned the color of old whiskey and the wind was gentle enough to carry memory, I stood at the edge of the field, watching the cows graze. Duke beside me, tail slowly thumping the dirt. No alarms, no letters, no engines growling up the road. Just silence, real silence. Not the kind you fear, but the kind you earn. I didn't win this fight because I was louder, or stronger, or richer. I won because I refused to become what they wanted me to be afraid. They thought I was just a man with a barn and some stubborn pride. But what they never understood is that this place, this land, these fences and fields and stories, this is more than soil. It's memory, it's lineage, it's love passed down in calloused hands and weather-worn boots. So when people ask me what happened out here, I tell them this: HOA, Karen called 911 and tried to evict me from my own ranch because she thought her son needed it more. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just a rancher, I was the final line. And sometimes, when the system breaks and the mob gathers and the law gets blurry, all it takes is one man to stand still and say no. Just no. Because home isn't where you sleep. It's where you fight for peace.